Yeah. And on the space shuttle too. I have a book on all these different science fair projects.
Spiders are sensitive to LSD. The astonishing fact was that spiders' brains are not that complicated. They're mostly nervous systems. But LSD has a very distinct effect on spiders.
Well, what did it do?
On web production.
I don't recall. It's just like one thin...
Instead of making a coherent web, in the usual mandala, shape of a center with the radiating and whatever you call it, circumferential,
Mm-hmm.
it's a kind of free-form, 3D, wild, abstract expressionist web is what they do.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't look very comfortable. It doesn't look
do they
like
turn vegetarian too?
It doesn't look. It doesn't look like they're very comfortable when they're doing it, but it
sounds fun. I mean, if I was a spider, I'd love to jump around that. I mean, hopefully that's something bioengineering will give every person.
A friend of mine who's an expert in spiders gave me an amazing lecture once on the wolf spider.
Mm-hmm.
It's like this mass of nerves. Each one of those hairs on a wolf spider is actually a nerve ending.
Mm-hmm.
And he said a wolf spider can sit on one side of a tree, and you can come and pluck a leaf off the other side of the tree, and it will react. It will feel that, and yet the brain itself is scarcely more than a few neurons in the middle of this incredibly complex system. So he describes the spider as this kind of almost empty consciousness, completely, in touch through its neural system with, a world of sensory data that's far richer than ours, but with a brain that doesn't process it in the same complex degree.
Well, the reason I brought the spiderweb thing up is that I remember reading about Appalachian folk medicine referring to
wounds,
eating spider webs and applying them to wounds.
Wounds, I knew that. Yeah.
And also in that
why would you eat a spider web?
Well, I guess you'd have to grow up in Appalachia
well, no,
to develop that craving, that and Big Macs,
For what, like internal bleeding, you think, or?
Well, just let me finish this. And then Leland's book on gypsies that I was just talking about referred to some things with spider webs too, and what recent research has divulged is that some of these spider webs, particularly the ones that the spider makes to wrap the prey, have antibiotics to preserve its prey for like days on end while the spider's trying to digest it.
Wow. So in other words, there's once again, old wives' medicine turns out to be actually completely correctly applied.
Well, that's pretty much...
If you put antibiotics in a wound, you help the wound, obviously. It's not just... I think people used to think it was a constrictive thing, that the web would somehow...
That may be involved, too.
Block the blood
That may be
flow.
involved, too.
Yeah.
But, I thought that was kind of interesting.
There are many animal cures. There's some that involve killing animals in order to apply, blood or an open cut of an animal to a wound and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
What else? What other animal cures?
But these animal cures, I think, tend to be kind of overlooked by a lot of ethnobotanists.
Well, I remember one evening in Wisconsin, you said something that's always stuck with me. I thought it was the wisest thing I ever heard from your lips. You said, "Gosh, everything is psychotropic."
Well,
and I mean the idea being that if you're in a sensitive enough state vis-a-vis the world, everything will change your state. Whether you're eating it or drinking it or looking at it or smelling it or any kind of sensual input, sensory input can be psychotropic.
Well,
would you still stick with that?
Yeah, it's just that I don't know how sensitive I am now. I mean, that's the big thing.
How sensitive can we be in the industrial
Well, I mean, after drinking a lot of absinthe, how sensitive can we be? I mean, it's...
We don't want to actually confess to anything.
No.
Well,
why not? It's my brain.
We study these things in books. We don't actually do them. Of course. Right.
Well, absinthe makes a heart grow fonder.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay. Well, but yeah. I had...
Actually, it's absinthe, which is illegal. The constituent parts of absinthe aren't illegal, which is...
They're banned by the FDA as a food additive.
Wormwood?
Yeah, you can't add it to brownies, cookies, things like that. Or
you can grow it, though.
Yeah, and you can... It's just... It was banned, was in 1909 or something really early like that, and and of course you're going to deal with anachronisms in the law that until they start pushing it in junior highs in Florida, I don't think anybody's going to do anything about it.
Yeah.
But
there's a strong body of opinion now which says that that wormwood is not particularly destructive, and that it was the alcohol that was destroying people.
well,
not the wormwood.
there's some views on that. The problem with it is that nobody's gotten financing recently in this country, or to my knowledge in any other country in the world, to basically imbibe a bunch of mice on 1909 vintage absinthe. I mean, they don't really know. Thujone, which is the active component of absinthe, is a terpene, like turpentine. And there was an interesting article in the Journal of American Medical Association which talked about Van Gogh's addiction. And they were speculating that one of the reasons he was eating paint is because he was trying to crave this addiction.
Right.
And
supposed to have afflicted more than one 19th century artist, I believe.
Yeah, well, Oscar Wilde was one. And I mean, everybody. I mean, it was just the rage.
Yeah, but if you painted with the oil, with the terps that were available in those days, I think you could fall prey to this syndrome. No?
I don't know. I mean, I haven't drank turpentine, and I actually have kind of a turpentine allergy, just from working with turpentine a lot. But and I noticed that absinthe hasn't made me get over that. But
well, it's just not every terp is going to be the same as every other terp in its effect, presumably.
Yeah. Well, what was kind of weird is when they were talking about this JAMA article was talking about Van Gogh's life. He was buried in a thuja tree, which is I think it's a kind of cedar that grows in Europe and is naturally high in thujone alkaloids, or not thujone terpenes, was growing on his grave, and they reburied him something like 30 years after his death, and they had a hard time chopping the roots out of his casket.
Good Lord.
So that's like really having addiction chase you.
I'd say so.
Yeah.
But that image that you get from French painting of the period of the absinthe drinkers, the famous painting of these kind of green people sitting in front of their little green drinks, some people now believe that that's
I believe that totally.
Exaggeration.
I believe that,
You believe that there was a difference between being an absinthe addict and just being, a drunk? Because some people now say there isn't, that it's not true, that it's just like absinthe was cheap.
Well, what we need is some spiders, and then we'll...
Yeah, yes, absolutely.
And then we'll know.
Absolutely. I have to say, even though we're supposed to not be admitting to personal experiences, that that little experiment that we carried out definitely seemed to me to be different. It seemed to be different than just having like a liqueur or something.
Well, I can talk about some legal experiments.
Okay.
With amanitas in northern Minnesota and northern Michigan, and then in the Arrowhead of Minnesota, which is the part that extends over Lake Michigan. And that was actually a pretty interesting trip. That was last fall, and I went up with a friend, and it was specifically to look for Amanita muscaria.
Fly agaric.
Yeah, but
Those
up there...
are pretty dangerous.
Well,
this is controversial. We still don't know whether it's dangerous or whether it's just said to be dangerous.
It's my understanding it's pretty dangerous.
What's your present understanding?
Well, I think first of all I should predicate any discussion on this by saying that don't try this at home, and also if you're the person that responds to don't try this at home, don't try this at home. I think that you kind of want to get pretty technical. In fact, I won't even talk about ingestion experiments. I'll just talk about the plants in general. I found one of the things I like to do when I'm foraging for herbs is spot things from a car or truck, because it's just a faster way to work.
Well, also because you get a very interesting healthy growth of certain things along the side of highways.
Well, that was what's so weird about the amanitas. They were always growing near where people were.
Yeah.
This is like mid-September, and you find these intense yellow and red white speckled mushrooms growing, right near parking lots and all over the place, and people are just walking by, like nothing's going on, and they have such a quality that you really have to be around one that's growing.
Oh yeah, once you tune into these things, they definitely have a very strong personality.
And I was talking to a mycologist, mushroom expert at the Field Museum of Chicago, and I asked him, is there any work on population genetics with these mushrooms to try and determine if there's any mixing of the gene pool, or if a population stays steady in one area for thousands of years? Because that would be kind of interesting from the point of view of trying to, like, if the amity is just some, well, just sort of.
Well, thousands of years. I mean, this raises the question, which I still have not gotten clear in my mind, as to whether there were any Amanita muscaria in the New World until contact with Europe. Do you?
I don't know anything about that.
It's my understanding that there were.
Me too, but I'm still not sure.
Whereas the converse is not true. The other, much safer variety of psychedelic mushroom, the psilocybin, were not, I don't believe, in the old world before contact.
McKenna says they were, but that's a minority opinion.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, cannabis is another very questionable one here. Was it in the New World before contact?
No, I don't believe so.
It's not.
I do not believe
most
so.
people say not, but there is a minority opinion that it was. So I don't know.
Which I do not buy into. I don't think there's any evidence suggesting there was cannabis in the New World.
No, I haven't seen it myself. Well, but what were the in South America you have these actual statues of mushrooms. Some of them humaniform, with faces or whatever. Others, just as far as I can see, statues of mushrooms.
Oh, clearly the Aztecs used psilocybin.
And these would all be psilocybin
yes,
mushrooms.
I believe so.
Yeah.
Well, while we're on the subject of psilocybin, I got some information in the mail about the American Type Tissue Culture Collection. Do you know about them?
No.
They're in Baltimore.
Mm-mm.
Well, what they do is they take tissue specimens of pretty much every fungi species and have a standard type that they hold for the United States. And they started destroying their psilocybin in their collection like January of this year.
Any particular reason?
Well, it becomes kind of a sensitive issue because there are certain species, i.e. tampanensis, which are really only known from one specimen collected from the wild. And if a type tissue archive is destroying species, without any kind of notification of the scientific community or anything, there's a possibility that they could have wiped that species out.
How do you know they're doing it? Have they announced this?
Where did you hear about this?
From the Florida Mycological Research Center.
Where are they based?
They're in, I think, Pensacola. Which some people...
And they say that these people are doing this for what reason? Because they're scared to have what they consider to be
apparently what happened is that the DEA just told them to get rid of it.
Whoa.
And just to get a comparison, I don't know if there's tissue collections in Hungary. I know there's some. I think there's one in Hungary or Czechoslovakia which could have this strain, but.
Well, how could it if it's a uniquely New World strain?
Well, because it was discovered in the early 70s, and I imagine that its culture is in other collections. But
what did you call
Tampanensis.
it? Tampanensis.
But considering that there's debate now whether even to destroy smallpox, it seems like if something that rare is out there and it's just flippantly destroyed without any kind of hearing or public notice, except through a few obscure, kind of underground sources, that's a pretty serious thing.
Well, is there any thought that one could destroy the last smallpox?
Oh yeah.
Samples in the world.
Well, there's what's happening is that in Moscow and
there is no smallpox out there as an epidemic, as a.
Supposedly, all the world's smallpox is in two labs: one in the Soviet Union, or former Soviet Union, Moscow, one in the United States.
Is that right?
And what they're doing is they're sequencing it. When they get the sequence finished, which they're almost done, the original plan was to destroy it.
Now, what do you mean by the sequencing?
The sequencing is the actual genetic code of smallpox. So you'd have on a CD-ROM or whatever, you'd have smallpox as software.
with which presumably in the future at some time they would be able to recreate smallpox if they wanted to?
Yeah, it sounds loony, but there's reasons why someone would want to do that other than biological
No, but I
war.
mean,
but
it
you might
would-
want to understand why smallpox worked. But
Could you do that now? Could you recreate
no,
it
no,
from this information now?
no. But you know what you can do is if you need a 200 or so long sequence of DNA of a certain sequence, you can just have it cooked up at NYU. It's a service.
Right. So, in other words, you could cook up smallpox.
I don't know how long the smallpox sequence is. It could be a million base pairs. It could be 2 million. I have no idea.
There's a limit on the complexity of what can be done.
Yeah, but eventually, I don't think that will be such a problem.
What would be an example of a 200 unit DNA that you just mentioned? I mean, what sort of life form would it be?
It's not a life form.
Or a
It's like if
bacteria of some
you're
kind?
like researchers that are trying to make some sort of genetic marker or tag,
It's just a protein. It's just a series, right? It's just like a
It's a
chain of
nucleic
proteins.
acid.
Yeah.
which is different than a protein, but it's something you can whip up. But for research purposes, they can use 200. For I don't know. I have a friend in town who's doing work with heart, human heart tissue. And so he would call up NYU and send him the sequence he needed, and they would just whip it out.
In order to do research on various heart
congenital problems of the human heart. And
of course, some of these things are like vegetables, right? I mean, some of these new genetic.
Well, you get the issue here, though, is that extinction is a big thing, and one of the things that you kind of wonder is where are genetic specimens being kept? Like, you can only keep you'd like to think that there's somebody out there taking at least a segment or a blood sample from all the rare birds, rare species, rare plants, whatever out there.
Well, the UNESCO does it for plants to a certain extent, at least food plants.
But the idea of the DEA just sneaking in and just saying, look, we're gonna.
Yes.
That's pretty insidious. And
well, I mean, this clearly during the whole Green Revolution insanity, this actually did happen to a number of genetic strains of food plants, that certain kinds of wheat and corn and whatnot were just lost forever because nobody wanted to save them from the monocropping of the Green Revolution.
Well, it also happened in Ethiopia in the last famine because people were eating their seed corn, their seed grains.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's a problem. That was something that when I was in Belize, I just got back from Belize 3 weeks ago. I was down there for a month and I'd never been to Central America before, but I did get to talk to some Milparos, which are people that are doing Mayans that are doing some slash and burn, and I don't really know any Spanish. I mean, I can grope around with it, but it was nice to talk to them in English and ask them, well, do you have a native strain and not a hybrid that you're buying, like their watermelon seed they were getting from Canada. And one thing I thought was kind of funny is since I was looking at these farmers as like really knowledgeable, tough people, and yet, like a lot of knowledgeable, tough people all over the place, they got to survive and they're limited by what they can obtain. And I'm sure they're probably getting their grain, their seed from a local co-op or something. And here in the United States, we have such resources for being able to get seeds from around the world, or even different parts of Central America that they are not aware of.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of would like to. Well, I actually have sent them down some seeds to grow that are not hybrid, but are actual varieties.
There are actually now, it must be said, the situation is not nearly as parlous and awful as it was in the 60s and 70s. There are a lot of both commercial and non-commercial organizations which are saving heirloom seeds,
Like Seed Savers is
yeah,
one, and
yeah.
then there's a lot of guerrilla people out there doing it too. But,
Right, you know, like I've constantly, many times I've given the lecture of the horrible story of apples in New York State. That New York State used to be a great producer of hundreds of different kinds of apples, and then because of the commercial market, this was reduced to, you know, Delicious and Granny Smith and one or two others, and this wonderful genetic diversity was lost. And in fact, it wasn't lost. You remember last summer we came across that apple orchard that some people thought might have heirloom seeds. Well, this is the case, that all over New York State, these orchards that had gone to seed were discovered, and these wonderful varieties of apples are reappearing now in farmers markets, especially. Go down to the farmers market in Union Square or any of the New York farmers markets, you'll find a variety of apples that never existed when I was a kid. Never. You know, unheard of species with wonderful new flavors. You know, it's so there are some. It's generally gloomy, but there are these little.
Certain countervailing trends are beginning to emerge.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
well, the only way to stick with any of this stuff, I think, is to be optimistic. And even though there's a lot of grinding forces that are out there, really making it hard for. You know, on everything. There are, you know, people are becoming aware, and they're exchanging their knowledge and their resources, and a lot of stuff can be done just through an envelope, and that's a nice thing about seeds. So
Yeah. Well, we're about to run out of time. Actually, Robert, why don't you come back sometime and we'll continue this conversation, because we wander, and it gets deep, and then it gets shallow, and then we wander some more.
Yeah, and bring some beer, and you know.
And Shahram, you'd be welcome back to it any time.
Thank
It
you.
was
And
wonderful.
yeah, thanks for coming. It was great.
First time I read Persian.
Yeah, see how easy?
And you
Yeah.
all did very good.
Thank you.
You get an A.
Well, let's go out with some more of that excellent Kurdish Persian Sufi music. Rumi will be back, I hope, we'll be back in 2 weeks. I think we have to do a fundraiser. And this has been the Moorish Orthodox Radio Crusade with Peter Lamborn Wilson, that's me, and Bill Weinberg. And our guests tonight, Shahram Shiva, author of Rending the Veil, and Robert of the Church of. And we'll be back in 2 weeks. Until then, a big salam alaikum, peace be with you, and bye.